Oops. Hey everyone, today we'll be talking about the hormones in the pituitary gland. These are slides I made from my professor, Dr. Barakat. So Dr. Barakat, I don't mean to be stealing your slides. Please, me and my 103 subscribers we're not getting monetized anytime soon. Okay, anyways. So today we're going to be talking about comparing and contrasting the anterior and posterior pituitary glands, and how it relates to downstream hormone signaling, as well as identifying the mechanism for endocrine signaling based on the specific type of hormone chemical structure. So then we're going to review endocrine signaling. We're also going to review the anatomy of the endocrine system as well, just briefly, talking about the differences between anterior pituitary gland and posterior pituitary gland, as well as a little bit about the peripheral glands as well. These slides are just review because we have an exam coming up. All right, anyways. So as you guys know, most systems in the body kind of function under homeostasis, right? You think about blood, right? Blood has to keep a certain pH in the body. You think about temperature has to keep a certain, your body has to keep a certain temperature within the body. Your body's continually trying to achieve this like homeostatic state. When if you're sick, your body's trying to go back into being normal again. And so I think the biggest system that kind of is very central to this is the endocrine system. The endocrine system is responsible for maintaining homeostasis. And the way they do this is through the production and release of signaling molecules called hormones. So nearly all physiological processes are under some degree of endocrine regulation, and the endocrine system interacts closely with the nervous system. So nervous system endocrine system being hormones, nervous system being like nerves, central nervous system, brain stem. Those two systems are working closely together. Additionally, I was going to talk something about hormones. So hormones is one of the signaling molecules that travels within the blood, right? You have local signaling, you have different types of cell signaling. You have autocrine, I think, as well. Yeah, so you have, let me put this over here. Open image, new tab. Okay, whatever. Okay, here we go. So you have different types of signaling over here. Nearby cells is paracrine. Signaling itself is autocrine. Direct cell to cell, this is going to be gap junctions. And then lastly, as well, this is the fourth type of cell signaling, is going to be long distance. That's what hormones are. It's going to release from one organ, going to carry the signaling molecule through a bloodstream, and then going to go to a different receiving end as well. And these are just like different organs that in the endocrine system. So you have your pituitary glands, thyroid glands as well, there's ovary, testes, there's your gonads as well. Your pineal gland is where melatonin is produced, and that kind of regulates your sleepiness as well. Okay, so talking more about hormones. So hormones come in two types. Based on the chemical structure of it, it determines if it can travel chaperoned or unchaperoned. So if it can travel by itself, that means it must be polar, right? Water is polar, and so if it's traveling through the blood, then it has to be polar. If it's non-polar, then it's going to be hydrophobic, and therefore it has to be traveled with like a certain other lipoprotein. This is going to be like your steroids, for example. Right, hormones are capable of reaching their long distances through bloodstream to target organs in the periphery. Two types of hormones, right? There's central hormones, and there's going to be the peripheral hormones. Central hormones and peripheral hormones. The way we like to differentiate between these two is only look at the central hormones, and everything else is your peripheral hormones. So your central hormones are going to be ones produced in the central nervous system. Central nervous system being your brain stem. These are produced in your hypothalamus, and they're going to be stored and released in your pituitary glands. These are anterior and posterior pituitary glands. And luckily for your peripheral hormones over here, right, these are hormones that are produced anywhere else, peripheral hormones. So just think that anywhere else that's not within the hypothalamus or pituitary glands, this is where you're going to find your peripheral hormones. Hormones produced, okay, yeah, so for posterior and anterior pituitary glands, your posterior pituitary gland is being made of neurons. However, your anterior pituitary gland is not actually made of neurons. It's not actually part of the brain. It is in the brain area, but it's not made of the same cells. So even though the hormones produced in the anterior pituitary gland are called central hormones, they're not really part of the CNS, if that makes sense. And now I'm going to be talking about tropic and non-tropic hormones as well. So, tropic, think target, T for T, right? Tropic hormones are the ones that are going to target cells that are going to make hormones. So let's say you have let's say like I guess for example, you have to tell your teacher to like talk to the principal, for example, about something. You are going to target another cell, and that cell is going to make hormones to target a different cell. So it's almost like a middleman type of thing, right? There's going to be an intermediate for it. So the way it's going to happen is your pituitary gland and hypothalamus, right? These pituitary gland, hypothalamus, these are going to release hormones, travel to a different organ to signal that organ to release hormones, right? So it's tropic just means target another one cell to create another, for that one to make a change. Non-tropic hormones, these are your more direct things, right? Think of your adrenal glands, gonads, they're going to make hormones for cellular change. Let's say, okay, maybe like for an example, right? Let's say there's a pretty girl, right? And you don't want to go up to her, but your homeboy's right there as well. So you tell your homeboy to go tell the girl that, hey, my friend likes you. That would be a scenario of tropic hormones, because you're releasing a signal to your homeboy for their homeboy to go talk to the girl, right? So instead of you going to the girl like a man would be, you have to be tropic hormone, and that's not good. I mean, it's fine, but non-tropic hormone, right? These are going to be you going up straight to the girl and for conformational change. You gotta do what you gotta do, Kyle. All right, I'm gonna talk about some chemical classes of hormones. So, just like tropic and non-tropic hormones, we're going to be classifying them even further as well. So, amine, peptide, and steroid hormones. The way that these are categorized is from smallest to largest. So, smallest, medium, largest. So, amines, they're going to be containing your amine group as well as nitrogen, hydrogen. Going to be considered water soluble. Now, the next one is going to be your peptide protein hormones. So, these are derived from amino acids and have a primary structure in their complexity. They're also considered water soluble as well. You know that proteins are contain amine groups, right? So proteins are macromolecules. They're building blocks. While your amine hormones, they're going to be like kind of Legos, right? They're going to be smaller, and then right here, for example, in this diagram, you have your amine, right? This is one amine group, but then your protein consists of many amines. So just one, and then many together is going to be a protein. Lastly, your steroid hormones. These are going to be derived from your cholesterol. That's considered lipids. So because these compositions, these hormones are going to be water insoluble, these are going to be nonpolar. These are going to be your steroid hormones are going to be your sex hormones. So testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. So yeah, right here. Peptide hormone, any chain linked of amino acids, whereas your amine hormones are just going to be amino acids with modified groups. So amine, lots of amines together, peptide. And then steroid is just even larger as well. Some examples of your amine hormones are going to be your norepinephrine. These are also going to be your epinephrine and dopamine. Pretty small, pretty simple. Your peptide hormones can be a little bit larger as well. These can be polar, and these can travel unchaperoned. So amine, peptide, travel unchaperoned. They're going to be polar, they're going to be hydrophilic, they're going to be found in water. These are going to be a little bit bigger, so I'm talking about insulin, ghrelin, glucagon, oxytocin. Normally these end in IN, and these are going to be released from the anterior pituitary hormone. Anterior pituitary hormones. Lastly as well is going to be your steroid hormones. So these are going to be synthesized from cholesterol, considered lipids. These are going to be nonpolar and hydrophobic, so they need to be traveled chaperoned. These are going to be sex hormones, so testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. Yeah, and so this is a little bit of review for hormones. Autocrine is acting on itself. Paracrine is signaling to nearby neighbors. Endocrine, which is what we're focusing on, is one organ releases signaling molecules in the bloodstream and then carries it over to a distant target cell and signals that molecule over there. This is normally the slowest. So neuroendocrine signaling, right? Referring back to neurons and endocrine system, it occurs when a neuron communicates directly with a gland, non-neural cell. So this is when your hypothalamus, which is a neuron made of neural cells, hypothalamus is made of neurons, communicates directly to the anterior pituitary gland, which is not neurons. So you might be asking, how can something that's non-neuronal communicate? How can something that's neuronal communicate with something that's non-neuronal? Well, my friends, this is through the portal vein system, which we're going to get to a little bit as well. This type of signaling is essential for connecting the nervous system to the endocrine system, particularly at the junction between the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary gland. So how I said neuron system and the endocrine system, how they're kind of connected together. That's that junction, hypothalamus to anterior pituitary gland. Hypothalamus being made of neurons, anterior pituitary gland made of non-neurons. So that happens at the hypothalamo-pituitary junction. So a little bit compare and contrast with the anterior pituitary gland and the posterior pituitary gland. The posterior pituitary gland is made of neurons. Hypothalamus is also made of neurons as well. Those two organs are going to be connected directly. So this is going to be your hypothalamus up here, signaling, and then you see these wires down here, these like lines. It's going to connect to your posterior pituitary, which is over here. Right, they're going to be directly to neuron signaling. And they're also going to be physically attached, connected by the stalk. So, hormones produced within the hypothalamus are directly released into the posterior pituitary gland, where they are stored and released into the bloodstream. A little bit different than the anterior pituitary gland. So think of posterior pituitary gland as you dropping off, DoorDash is dropping off food to your house, right? You're not making the food, for example, but DoorDash is coming to drop off food to store at your house, right? You and the DoorDash guy, both are humans. That's how it's going to be coming together, because you both are talking together. You guys are both same person, same. You guys know each other as well, so that's kind of like that direct interaction. However, it's a little bit different than your anterior pituitary gland, which is a little bit funny because it's physically connected to the stalk, which is this thing right here, but it's not functionally connected, if that makes sense. So neurons in the hypothalamus produce and secrete hormones into the portal vein system, which is just a network of capillaries. It kind of sounds cool, portal vein system, like think of like portals, like whoa. But then it travels to the anterior pituitary gland to trigger the production and release of stimulating hormones. So these are going to be capillaries that connect to the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary gland. And those are going to be those hormones, stimulating hormones, are going to be from your tropic hormones, right? Because your tropic hormones are going to be coming and released from your hypothalamus to your anterior pituitary glands to your peripheral organs. Okay, and now talking about the hypothalamus. It's considered the command center of the endocrine system for any peripheral gland. So I think of hypothalamus as like a general, kind of overseeing everything. Everything starts from the hypothalamus. In my class, I learned that hypothalamus always starts from the very, very top. Any pathway, hypothalamus is always going to be the very top. Going to go down, it's going to talk to anterior or posterior pituitary gland, and then from there it's going to travel to and signal to other peripheral organs. I'm on session 2 of it right now. Let me change this. Primary central hormones are generally referred to as releasing hormones. So these are produced and secreted from the hypothalamus. So these are going to be your thyrotropin releasing hormones. Thyrotropin releasing hormones. These are going to target your thyroid. Gonadotropin releasing hormones, GnRH. Corticotropin releasing hormones, CRH. It's going to control cortisol within the adrenal gland. Prolactin releasing hormones, growth hormone releasing hormones, GHRH, growth hormone in the anterior pituitary gland. Oxytocin and vasopressin, these are going to be created by the hypothalamus and stored within the posterior pituitary gland. Not really trying to focus on like the names of this, but kind of seeing here how it's going to be a cluster of neurons to form functions, nuclei. And these are kind of like our cluster of nuclei that kind of have different functions as well. So one of them that I want to take a little bit more focus on is the arcuate, which is over here. Yeah, right here, arcuate infundibular nucleus over here. So taking a little bit bigger zoom on that, you're gonna have it over here. Arcuate nucleus over here. So talking about like hedonistic or appetitive behaviors, these are all going to be targeting your arcuate nucleus. So I'm going to talk about three different releasing hormones. These are going to be ghrelin, leptin, and cholecytokinesis. So ghrelin is made in the stomach. It's going to be your peptide hormone. It's going to induce hunger. It's also going to operate on a circadian clock. So when you are expecting breakfast, let's say at 11 a.m., 10 a.m., your body's going to be producing ghrelin, and that's going to be in response to trying to anticipate when food's going to come in so that you can digest it. This is also, which is kind of cool to know, that normally when people are fasting, either for spiritual discipline or to lose weight, normally they feel hungry at certain periods of the day, and that's normally when you expect to eat food. However, once you pass that period of hunger, let's say from 12 to 2, you normally eat lunch, and you're going on a fast now. If you manage to wait out those 2 hours from 12 to 2, normally you'll feel better at 3 o'clock because your body's no longer producing hormone, ghrelin, and you have successfully like kind of bypassed that spike in ghrelin. Um, Leptin, I think of ghrelin as like grr because your stomach is grumbling, so it's anticipating food. Leptin is made in adipose tissue. It's going to increase satiety. Works with insulin to make leptogenetic hormone. Um, so kind of like different in the sense of like ghrelin is supposed to make you, it's going to make you hungry. Leptin is make you increase your satiety. And then cholecytokinesis, it's made in the small intestine. It's going to be made in response to the bolus that's coming into your small intestine. So once it reaches your small intestine, it's going to release that CCK production and function with your leptin to make you feel full. And that makes sense, right? When you eat food and your food turns into bolus and it comes into your small intestine, that's going to make you it's going to tell your body that you're satisfied, that your satiety has increased. Because when you have food, you're not going to be expecting to eat more food, right? This is all to balance like food intake and energy expenditure. So just like one case study is the GLP agonist and weight loss. So GLP-1 is glucagon-like peptide 1. It's a peripheral hormone that functions with the glucagon, leptin, and CCK as a leptogenetic hormone. Meaning it reduces hunger and increases satiety. So it's going to work with leptin and cholecytokinesis, basically to increase satiety and to reduce hunger. GLP-1 is an agonist, meaning it mimics the behavior of another molecule. So GLP-1 is an endogenous molecule, and when it's released in your body, it's going to make you satisfied and reduce your hunger. However, when you take stimulus to the GLP-1R receptors in the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus to increase satiety. However, when you take it exogenously through drugs like Ozempic or Wegovy, these are GLP-1 agonists. So you take GLP-1, it's going to bind to these receptors, GLP-1R receptors, and the arcuate nucleus to increase your satiety. It has been shown to be effective in reducing hunger in long term and therefore aiding in weight loss. It's kind of trying to make you feel full. However, one side effect of this is making you feel nauseous. And that nauseousness comes from like when you eat a large meal. You kind of have that food coma and you want to like fall asleep. So that's just one side effect because that's what it's trying to do, right? It's trying to make you feel satisfied. All right, now talking about differences between posterior and anterior pituitary gland. So posterior pituitary gland is connected to the hypothalamus by the pituitary stalk. That is over here. Hypothalamus up here, posterior pituitary gland connected to by the stalk. It is also made of neurons. It is also part of the CNS, right? This diagram does a pretty good showing of like what is made of the same neurons versus what is not. So your hypothalamus, your posterior pituitary gland, these are both made of your neurons. However, anterior pituitary gland, these are not made of neurons. These are from a completely different cell, and therefore, this is from your endocrine system, your neuronal system to your endocrine system over here. So your posterior pituitary gland is part of the central nervous system because it's directly connected to the hypothalamus. Posterior pituitary gland, it's not going to make or produce hormones, but it's going to store hormones produced by the hypothalamus. There's going to be oxytocin and your vasopressin. Only two hormones you need to know. So it's slightly smaller than the posterior pituitary gland and does not produce any hormones. I said this already. However, the anterior pituitary gland, right? These are not made of your neurons. These are not considered to be part of the CNS, but receives hormones produced and secreted by the hypothalamus via the portal vein system. Portal vein system meaning your capillary network weaving around pituitary stalk. So your anterior pituitary glands are going to produce its own hormones in response to the detection of hypothalamic hormones, which are your releasing hormones. All right, so come back here. Right, so from your hypothalamus up here, it's going to release these releasing hormones. You secreted from the hypothalamus, and it's going to go to mainly your anterior pituitary gland. Releasing hormones, I looked this up earlier, compared to tropic hormones. Releasing hormones are solely made within the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary gland. But tropic hormones are the anterior pituitary gland releasing hormones to periphery glands. So both tropic and releasing hormones, they both release hormones to target another organ to produce something else. They both act on downstream gland to stimulate further secretion. These are going to be also, for example, from your releasing hormones. These were these hormones over here. These hormones over here, released from your hypothalamus. These hormones are going to go signal to the anterior pituitary gland, and the anterior pituitary gland are thus going to release these hormones over here to periphery organs. It's going to go from thyroid stimulating hormone. This is going to be a tropic hormone. It's going to target the thyroid and produce in response to the thyrotropin releasing hormone, which I said earlier is over here. Okay. And then next, circulated peripheral blood. This can be normally measured through your regular blood tests, TRH to TSH. Your adrenocortical hormone. These are going to target your adrenal cortex. It's actually going to stimulate your cortisol. Adrenocortical going to stimulate your cortisol. Just think of that. Adrenocortical stimulating your cortisol. Follicular FSH and LH. These are going to be your released from your GnRH. These are going to target your gonads. Growth hormones, one of the non-tropic hormones produced by in APG, and then prolactin is also non-tropic. These target your mammary glands. They're being produced in response to releasing prolactin releasing hormone. And so after those hormones are released from the anterior pituitary gland, it's going to go to your peripheral glands. Parathyroid glands, these are going to regulate your bile calcium and your bone density. These parathyroid glands are kind of an exception. They don't receive signals from the anterior pituitary gland. Thyroid is important for managing energy, health, nail health, and metabolism. Adrenal glands is responsible for cortisol and stress responses. So adrenal to cortisol. I think those are two words that are kind of unrelated to each other, but I'm going to have to relate them together. Gonads, testes, and ovaries. All right, and that's it for this lecture.